Okay, my name is Kevin Kraut. I'm going to do a little bit of intro on this book, Jesus Was Married. In one of the other sequences, I told that this was the first book ever written basically about Jesus being married in this century. And not long after that, a gentleman named Phelps wrote a book called Was Jesus Married? Now, when Dad did this book, and he had some of these things, he went up to Joseph Fielding Smith up in the church presence he's building. And Dad and Joseph were pretty good friends. And he walked up, and Dad was a scholar, so he told a little bit about how this book worked and what it was to Joseph Fielding. And Joseph Fielding Smith said, well, I don't have any problem with it. The actual story is right there in the Bible where Jesus it was his own wedding. He had to provide for the wine, and that was the marriage of Canaan, and so I don't have a problem with this book at all. And so, he looked over and says, that's pretty good. And he said, but now, Ogden, why don't you call it something like maybe Jesus was married, or was Jesus married, or something like that? And Dad said, well, was he or wasn't he? And he said, okay, that's good. And so that's how this book came to be. The book itself is pretty interesting. It talks about the concept that Jesus was a rabbi. In that day, rabbis had to be married to more than one wife. That tradition was not taken away out of the Jewish people until Rabbi Gershom had put a ban on that somewhere around 1000 AD. 1,000 years after Christ, the Jews had actually put a ban on plural marriage. And it was because of the persecution of the Roman Catholic Church, or that faction that was there at the time. And so there are still Jews that practice this principle. It was very well known. And so Jesus Was Married was very, very unique because there are several places in here that talk about the reasons why, what actually happened, the covenants of marriage. Celsus, who actually taught that Jesus was put to death because of plural marriage, not necessarily just because of the Beatitudes and that kind of thing. And so it's a very interesting book. It goes into detail. There's one place in here that talks about the book of Psalms. It's in the Church of England Bible, and it says the king's daughters were among those honorable wives. And then it says, upon the right hand did stand the queen in a venture of gold of Ophir. So the king's daughters, it talks about how there were plural daughters that were with the king. And so it's kind of interesting. There's a few other places that talk about it. Now with the Da Vinci Code, most people kind of understand that Christ had been married. Few understand that he had more than one wife. So that is, Jesus was married.